Yes. So, hello and welcome to this special session that we have here at EGEV 2020 tonight. I'm very proud to introduce to you Ola Rosling, who is the president and co-founder of the Gapminder Foundation. He founded this venture together with his wife and father, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the work of Hans Rosling and his presentations. But going back in time, ever since 1999, Ola has been leading the development of the trend analyzer software, which was actually acquired by Google in 2007. He has then moved on and done interesting contributions in terms of visualization to the masses, and founded Gapminder in 2011 to develop free teaching materials for a fact-based worldview. And actually in 2014, he coined the term Factfulness, and I'm convinced that many of us in our community have read the book that he has authored together with his wife and his father. So we are very, very proud to have Ola here today with us to tell us a bit about his view on data-driven storytelling and how you can reach an impact far beyond the academic world using visualization and interesting narratives and stories. So very welcome, Ola, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for that introduction. I want to, of course, tailor this presentation a bit towards the visualization and the handicraft of telling visual stories, which I've been doing together with my wife and my father for 20 years now. But as many of you, 140 actually, saw, you got a questionnaire with fact questions, because this has been key for us as a methodology all the time. So I'm actually going to start by looking at one of the fact questions I asked among the 18 other questions. And let's start with this one. Up to 1990, 17 countries in the world had been led by a female head of state or government. What was it in 2019? And we give you three options: 29 countries, 53 countries, or 76 countries. So we're living in the first time in human history when there is data about pretty much everything. And Gapminder Foundation is testing if this data has made its way into the heads of the people. And this is only one such example. And now I have tested you. Here is the correct data. Since 1953, when the first head of a government, except for royal families, etc., in Mongolia, I can't even pronounce her name, Sukbataranjanyma, she was the first woman to lead a country. And since then, up to 1990, as the question relieved, 17 other women-led countries, Margaret Thatcher's and others. And what happened then? That was the question, right? And I asked her, is this around 27 or is it much, much higher? Here is the correct number. It's a revolution of feminism in terms of leadership. This planet has really changed, and today it has been 76 countries which had a woman as their leader. It's an amazing improvement. All these women have been the most important person in the country to lead it forward. Do you know this? You're probably a very educated audience watching this, right? Correct answer is 76. I'm showing you now the results from a poll we did last year. It's only 6 months old data. Together with Ipsos Mori, we asked 32 countries, the general public, with online panels. Here are the results. You can see at the top, Indonesia, 8% picked the right answer. Sweden is unfortunately down here. We're very feministic in our countries. Still, only 3% are aware of the enormous revolution in female leaders, which we lived through during the last 20 years, right? So we're unaware of the progress in the topics that we care most about. That's essential. But even more essential here is what happens if we write ABC on bananas and give them to monkeys and let them pick and answer the questions. We can read out the questions to them as well. Actually, 33% of the monkeys would pick the right answer when we ask about female leaders in this planet. The monkeys win over the humans in 32 countries, and if we asked all the countries in the world, I guess it's going to be the same. This is essential to Gapminder's education. We identify misconceptions that are extremely systematic. Look, this is not that people are ignorant from person to person. No, this is systematically underestimating female leaders across countries. People don't realize what it looks like. And now I have tested you. Okay, here are your results. EGEV will be your results, and you were better than Sweden. Congratulations. You were not even close to monkeys. Okay, this visualization as such is pretty ugly. You even see the line break there is broken on monkeys. But information I'm showing you is super interesting. And I think that is the key to Gapminder's success and my father's success. We're focusing on the important stuff. Okay, it's not the beauty in the visualization that is key. You are completely unaware, 95% of you're wrong about the revolution in female leadership. And you are not telling your daughters that they live in the first decades of human history where women actually can get power. This is fascinating, but you didn't know it. It's a pretty bad visualization, actually. I don't exactly like it. So please, the content that I'm going to show you, it's freely available under Creative Commons. You're free to take the data and improve the visualizations as much as you want to. These are the results if you look at how many pick the wrong answers and very wrong answers. So people completely underestimate it, you see, across the countries. Here's another question. I'm going to go through two of those and look at this. 30 years ago, 56% of the world's population lived in something called low-income countries. What is the share today? A, B, or C? Again, we're giving you three options. That is to make it easy to compare with chimpanzees. Is it 10% today who live in low-income countries? Is it 35%? Or is it more than it used to be? 56% it used to be. Is it 60% today? Correct answer? Well, let's look at the data. And you might have seen this bubble chart that we developed already 20 years ago together with my father. But this time I'm going to use it to show what the world looked like 30 years ago. And on the horizontal axis, it's like a world map, right? To the left, we have poor, and to the right, we have rich. It's a pretty simple way. It's GDP per capita. And then on the vertical axis, we have lifespan. How long do you live? It's like a compass you see there with healthy and sick people. And there were countries on all levels of incomes and all levels of health, but you see most of them were there in the middle. That was back in 1988. So now the question was, what happened during the next 30 years? Back then, the World Bank had put a line and labeled these countries below $580 per person per year. They call it low-income countries. And those were 56% of humanity because India and China was down there. This is what has happened since then. The world has completely changed. And we fast forward the world by seeing 30 years of development in front of our eyes. And we use the visual machine to realize what kind of world history we've been living through. India and China and many other big countries like Nigeria have left the limit of low income, according to the World Bank, and only a few countries are left there. Of course, in the middle-income countries, there are poor people as well. These are averages, but that's a different story. We have an enormous economic growth, and also look at the lifespans. If we just play that thing again, we can see how everywhere lives have gotten longer. Look at the left bottom corner. People used to be only 50 years old. Today, there is roughly one country, Lesotho, which is on that life expectancy. So with more money have come more health, or the other way around. When people got healthier, they also got richer. I'm not talking about the causality, but people are unaware of these enormous changes, both in terms of money and health. So what did they answer? Today, the correct answer is 9%. A fraction, not even 10, as I think I put in the question. No, it says 9%. How many answered 9%? In those 32 countries, again, only 7% picked the correct answer. That's devastating, right? And among you, this was terrible. Only 11% of you spontaneously, instead, look at the right end of this screen. 58% of you spontaneously thought there are more people in so-called low-income countries, without defining what low income is. And this is the world view part of it, talking about visualizations. We all walk around with a visualization of the world we live in. It's like a dreamy world with dangerous places and poor people. And now today with Corona, it's a threat. We got tons of pictures in our heads. That's also visualization. And to change those pictures inside the head, that's really what visualization should be about. Helping people to see what the world actually looks like. And those moving bubbles now have given you a very different picture where you saw masses of people moving out of poverty, right? We asked 18 of these questions in 32 countries. And yes, we cherry-picked the questions where people are wrong. So we first tested thousands of questions in small surveys to the UK public, actually. And those are the 18 where the UK public scored worst in small Google survey. It's a fascinating new function that Google has where you can actually poll a few people. Try that. That's what we've been using. And then with the 32 countries, we used Ipsos Mori. Here are the results. 8% of those 19,000 respondents or 20,000 respondents in 31 countries, sorry, I was wrong, 8% of them managed the incredibly difficult to pick the wrong answer 18 times in a row. A human being cannot, a chimpanzee cannot do that, but humans can do that with systematic misconceptions. Here are all the other results. Look at it. The most common result was 2 correct answers out of 18. This is how predictable misconceptions are. A systematic misunderstanding. A monkey with 3 options on 18 questions would score 6 correct, right? So actually only the average among you and humans were 2.9 on average. That means that only 5% scored better than random. And these are all kinds of questions. I showed you low-income countries. I showed you women's in leadership. There are also questions about heating up the oceans with global warming. We've been testing all kinds of things. So we're scanning the human minds to find systematic misconceptions. And I'll tell you, whatever visualization you do that explains these things, it's going to be a big surprise to the audience. And they might confuse that first moment they realize what the world actually looked like. They might think it's because your visualization is very useful. But it's actually because they were so damn wrong about the content before you show them what the data tells you, right? So sometimes our success has been mainly because people were so damn wrong before they saw the data. And the only way to have them realize what the world actually looks like is through visualizations. So we decided to use visualizations because we have no other options. It's the only way to show them what the world looks like. People have an illusion of an over-dramatic worldview. And this we have 95% of us walk around with a very gloomy picture of a divided world with poor and rich, with lots of refugees, diseases, and war. At the same time, the development statistics tells us a very different story about the latest decades. Still, it's hard to get away from it. It's like a visual illusion. Even after looking at lots of statistics, even you know that this is a visual illusion that everybody sees systematically wrong, like the arrows to the left of this new fascinating phenomena. Look at the right. I hope it's moving in front of you. It's a static picture. You can find these illusions online. Nobody yet can explain why this thing is moving in our heads, as to my understanding. It's absolutely fascinating. When we see these illusions of the world in front of us, we don't feel ashamed. I don't think anybody of you who is watching this are ashamed of yourself and your stupid eyes and your stupid brain. Instead, you're curious and fascinated. How on earth is the human brain working? And with the illusion of a gloomy world that comes from these news reports, we should also be curious and ask ourselves, how is it that across the world people get the same misconceptions about what the world looks like? It's not that Swedes are really wrong about something and in Turkey they are correct about it. No, it's everywhere. Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates were in that list, and Japan, right? Across the world, we're watching the same overdramatic news, right? And we get the picture of what the world looks like. And I think it's building up in our heads in the same way across the world, and that's why it's so systematic. So the reason we want to see news like this, By the way, this has nothing to do with fake news. Look at these pictures. These are things that actually happen, documentary photographers that take a picture of a real event. So the problem is not fake news. It's the selective sample of the news that fill our brains with pictures that we use to build our worldview, and it's so gloomy all the time. And what's the problem with that? Doesn't that make people care about dangerous things and bad developments? No, the problem is that people end up losing their hope, and they think the world is only getting worse, so we can't do anything. That's really dangerous. Instead, we need to keep track of all the positive developments so that when something bad happens, like Corona, we really take it seriously. The moment you see a pandemic scaling up with a doubling over a couple of weeks in another continent, you should think, this is serious, instead of believing that everything in the world is getting worse, right? Of course, we also see very skewed positive pictures like the paradise beaches and the beautiful animals. Oh, they are so cute. I hope they're not going to go endangered soon, right? So we see pictures from the rest of the world, but they're always selected. Very strange people from elsewhere with fascinating cultures build up an idea of foreigners as being people who are very difficult to understand, right? So yeah, we're filling our brains with this, and nobody have any bad intentions. A journalist who stops showing fascinating stuff will soon lose all their viewers and readers, right? So I'm not blaming journalists. This comes down to how the human brain works. We are the worried. We want to see extraordinary events because otherwise we don't care, right? But we should be aware of this. Like with the visual illusions, I believe we should be teaching in schools. Children should learn that this is the cognitive bias that they will put in their heads. And that is going to make the world difficult to understand. It's like we have an attention filter that everybody needs to be aware of, like CBT for everyone. From everything that happens in the world, only a fraction reaches our brains. And it's the fraction that is most dramatic. And from that, we build our worldview, right? It looks something like this. If that wasn't because of the human brain, if it was a cultural phenomena, then we would find different systematic errors in different countries, right? But we don't. It's very systematic. So that's what Gapminder does. We're guided by the size of the misconceptions, and we don't really care about political ideology. We think that wherever people are extremely wrong, it's going to be good to correct that error. Then we don't really know the political implications from it. That might be naive, but that's the ideology, and it's really fun to fight misconceptions. It started with my wife, me, and my father, but today this is the bigger team we have. We're a small, non-profit, independent educational foundation in Stockholm, and we're doing it from the pure mission that fighting devastating misconceptions needs to be done with a fact-based worldview that everyone can understand. And this comes down to the simple fact that we believe in democracy. If we didn't, only the elite should know the correct answer and then rule the world. But we do believe in democracy, and this means that everybody needs to understand pure key developments of the world. We need to understand it, all of us. We can't just leave it to a little elite to know the facts and everyone else just listen. No, it has to be simplified. So Hans, my father, he used to talk about it as brutal simplification. That's what we're doing. We're just making sure that it's fact-based. So it's fact-based, brutal simplifications. That's the end visualizations we're doing. And he started doing it at the university to teach his own students and other colleagues because he figured out that they were so wrong. And what happens when everybody is wrong about the same things and you want to explain it to them is that you start simplifying and simplifying because you need to replace their false simplified worldview with a correct one, and the only way is to make it almost as simple but more correct. So that has been the tricky balance. That it started with this picture. This is done by my father, I think 23 years ago. It's actually the case that my father was a global health professor already in Sweden when he started collaborating with me and my wife Anna at the age of 50. Then he became a world famous global health professor. It coincided very well in time with collaborating with us. Up till then, his charts looked something like this. He actually went to this is in 1995. he started developing these charts because he heard the students in Sweden talking about developing countries and developed countries, as if the world was divided in two. They confused Malawi and Central African Republic, really, really poor low-income countries. They confused it with Brazil and Indonesia, just because it was former colonies, right? So everything that used to be a colony was then rethought of as developing countries. And these were the students who wanted to become doctors and go out and save the world. And he figured out that they believed going to Malawi and going to Indonesia would be the same thing. I mean, it's white European students who have a very simple worldview. But this is so common, you find it everywhere still today, even though everybody celebrates. And you just introduced me by saying that we have become world famous from having impact on the public. I don't think so. My father was really disappointed. We kept improving these graphs, putting color on them, and this he got some help by a young student in Uppsala. This graph my father had produced when we started helping him. We made it easier and easier, and this is the innovation that my wife and I did to put the trail of one country on top of the others so that you can use your knowledge about, say, South Korea to understand the rest of the world today, and vice versa. If you know the differences in the world, let me just show you this. It's free online on our website. The tools we have here on Gapminder Tools, you can see the bubble chart down here. It's open source code, and we're not going to sell this one to Google. It's a new version of a similar tool. So you zoom in here and see all the countries. So let's take Sweden, for example. And there you go. This is where Sweden is. It's the same money on the horizontal axis. Put it larger when you're presenting. The most common error that presenters do in this world is they have too small font size. It's very simple. Hans used the rule that 18 points should be the minimum font size on any slide. And it's true. He used to walk into the back of the theater to see what the screen looked like. And if he could not read the font, then it was too small. A very practical way of looking at presentations. So this now has a little button down here to present. And when I'm on my computer, I can see it's small font. Very important visualization tips there. Take care of that one next time you present, right? And here is Sweden 2019. We can lock the background and go back with Sweden only and see where Sweden was on income and lifespan. And we go back, oh, it was outside. We have to zoom out there. Look, that's where Sweden was in year 1800. I'm going to zoom in again. We can adjust the alpha here, the transparency. And we can see 200 years ago, Sweden was below the country with the lowest life expectancy in the world today, right? That tells me something about my country. My grandmother grew up in a country which was less healthy than any African country is today, right? Look at where Africa is. It's quite high up. It's 60 years on average life expectancy, or 70, somewhere in between there, right? And Sweden's path into the future, we can take the historic data. I used to be an economic historic student, and then I dropped out and I did this visualization, and then my father got world famous. Here comes Sweden. Look, here we can see that Sweden in 1909 was where Papua New Guinea is today, the least healthy Asian country in the world. You can see the size of the bubbles, its population, the color is the region. Here are the Asian countries of today, and there is no country below this level where Sweden was at the First World War, roughly, right? And then came a pandemic, right? Look at that. That's the Spanish flu. It brought down Sweden to a level which is far below Central African Republic today. So I'm putting the historic data in context with the world of today to understand both of them. So when I know that my grandparents used to live in Sweden back here in the 40s, right? They worked in a factory, my grandfather. That's where Philippines are today. And I understand that they want to buy their motorcycles and go on their holidays, because that's what I remember my grandparents were celebrating. For the first time, they had a secured salary, which meant they could actually save for a summer holiday of 2 weeks going on a motorbike to Norway. To understand the world, I talk about visualization inside my brain, how I see Swedish history and how I see Philippines today. And I need to put the dots together based on data instead of looking at the news and getting a divided, simplified, dramatic worldview. So there are tons of stories I'm trying to tell when doing that. This is the tool that was the first one, which was acquired by Google. It says copyright Google in the right corner. And then at Google, me and my wife started the public data team with a beautiful mission to democratize access to data. And this meant that people, the journalists sitting at the press conference with the politicians, should quickly be able to search on Google to actually figure out if the politician is bullshitting. That's my dream of a use case for data, right? Where the access and the ease of interpretation is so fast that the people with the money cannot be ahead of everyone else with fancy analysis that was actually tailoring the data the way they wanted the story to go. It should be equally fast for everyone else to show the other stories, right? That to level the playing field. So we worked at Google. We integrated public statistics from the UN and the World Bank and Eurostat into the search engine. So people searching for stats should quickly find the results. This little search box is with statistic results. You can find it on many of the development indicators for the world today. Google is still developing it even further. And that's the dream scenario, that there would be a way to find statistics faster. And it's really tricky, though, because most people, I have figured out after years working with data, that most people don't spend their evenings searching for statistics. Isn't it surprising? But it's actually true. I worked at Google, I looked at the search logs, and I tried to find every statistic search query. I actually put a little report up there for 15 years ago. And I cried. Because people don't search for data. People don't search for correcting their worldview. They don't go online and say, what does a fact-based worldview look like? What is the fact-based picture of Corona? Maybe Corona today, they look at the latest trend, which Google is carefully showing, and it's easily misleading and very fragmented. It's a snippet like this one. You see the life expectancy of Botswana, for example. The big worldview that is wrong and upside down in so many people's heads cannot be corrected with search snippets, we figured out. So actually me and Anna, we left Google because we thought it's the wrong place to be if you want to educate people. The right place to be, I'm going to tell you what it's called. You might have heard of it. It's called school. Yeah, it's a fascinating building where you send kids. If you have kids, you know it's hard to work when the kids are home. But if they go to something called school, the parents can work and the kids can learn. And that's actually where most people saw the world map the first time. That's where we learn a different worldview, which is less intuitive. If you look out your window, the horizon is flat, right? It's a simple visualization that tells you the world is flat. Then you go to school and the teacher says it's round. No, it looks flat. The kids say, no, it's actually a circle. No, it's a ball like this. You learn the best visualization I know about is the watch. That's what you learn in school. The kids are practicing how to read time from a circular little thing like this, right? Now it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3. It's the most useful visualization. So I think visual explanations of the world need to be integrated in schools. So we dropped out of Google, me and Anna. We developed visualizations for all kinds of things. Here is a tool that we call the income mountains. It's a simple also present button there with larger font size. Before year 1800, how many people were below $1 or $2 per day? Extreme poverty called today. This is adjusted for inflations and so on. So we have been visualizing things in simple ways based on tons of statistics to try to have everybody understand. Look at how billions of people were escaping extreme poverty over the years up to the Second World War. And look here, 1975 is a really important year in human history. You know what happened? Yeah, the end of the Vietnam War, etc. But I was born. Yeah, I was born into this world. It was divided in a 2-hump camel world. I was born in the rich hump, very nice. We had bicycles and stuff. And my parents wanted to save poor people, so we moved to Mozambique when I was 4 years old. And I also grew up in Mozambique down there in the poor world. Yes, the world was divided in two back then when I was born. But what happened next? Most people haven't realized. Look at this visualization of how billions of people are moving out of extreme poverty. And we're using the same color legend, same color code in this one as in the bubble chart. That's the most common error I see in visualizations, that when you move from one chart to another one, you change the color legend and people have to go look and read what the colors mean and remap in their head. And the moment they've done that, they lost interest, right? And attention, and they forgot what was the question, right? You can't do that. You have to stick to colors. You have to adjust the visualizations so it's the transition from one is very easy to the next one. This was China and India leaving extreme poverty, starting to catch up. And you see today, they used to be down there in the poor end, but billions moved out of extreme poverty, and they are soon going to be up here in the end of this income scale where we do overconsumption. Have you tried overconsumption? It's really nice. You have tons of things. It doesn't work. It's unsustainable. So the pictures we're showing doesn't mean I want the world to look in a certain way, but this is what's going on and people are wrong about it. But to really understand, why do we do visualizations? It's to explain what the world looks like. And my wife, Anna, she's really the brilliant one. She said, people don't realize what $2 a day means. They never lived on that level. So she was actually a photography student. We went to her mother's house in Ludvika in Sweden, and we took photos of what life on this income level looks like. Here is a man doing the washing of the dishes. It's Lars, and you can read a little bit about to explain the data. Anna figured out that we need to go beyond numbers and show what the numbers mean, and then maybe back to the numbers to explain what different income means. So here is an innovation, because she went to students in Sweden and asked them, how rich do you think you are? If you put everybody in the world, it was 7 billion back then. Where do you think you belong? If you put the billions, every figure here is 1 billion people. Which one do you belong to? And they say, well, I'm not like Bill Gates, super rich, and I'm not very poor, so I'm probably here in the middle. This is the most common answer we got from students in Sweden school, and it's absolutely wrong. We are the rich. I have 3 kids. I tell them on a weekly basis, we are the rich. Don't say anything else. Yes, there are differences among the rich, but we belong to the richest billion. We got all the resources. We can do the biggest changes, right? But we don't know. We think we're in the middle, and we talk about middle class all the time. It's a completely useless word that creates an image of us being in the middle. That false visualization in our head needs to be corrected based on data. So Anna said, people hate data. And that is true, unfortunately, as you saw with the search results. They don't like data. So she said, let's remove the numbers and show them pictures instead. And she invented Dollar Street. There is a great TED Talk. I'm just going to do it quickly here. It's also free online. Today, or this week, we're updating the user interface, actually. And it's hundreds of families. Look, they are sorted by income. So the poorest are to the left, and they are from Haiti, Burundi, Haiti again, Burkina Faso, Myanmar, Malawi, Myanmar, Liberia, India. Across the world, there are people who are poor. No, not in Sweden, not that poor. There are no children in Sweden living on the street because the social system would take care of them, right? So it's not that all countries have the poor. Yeah, we had relative poverty we have in Sweden, but not extreme poverty. That's below $2 and you're missing food, right? So this puts everyone in relation on a big street. And on Dollar Street, the beautiful thing is that in your block, your neighbors, you share not the culture maybe, and not the same country passport, but you share the same money. And it's fascinating to see, what does it look like if Anna showed the students in Sweden, well, how does your bed look like? So you can click here on hundreds of different items. These are beds on different income levels. She zoomed in and said, okay, so you think you're here in the middle. Is this what your beds look like? And she looked at a few of these beds, like this one in China on this income level. No, they said, well, maybe like that, okay, maybe you're poorer. So this is what the beds look like. You see, this is showing a fact-based worldview based on numbers, but we almost don't look at the numbers at all because we're using the street as the framework here. Up here on the high income level, the students start recognizing their beds and say, yeah, that's what my bed looked like, right? And you can do hands, for example. Look at people's hands by income. And you see how these nice hands of the people who don't really work hard with their hands compared to the people down here on the middle income who works in factories, those who manufacture the computer in front of me. And we can move down and see what the data actually looks like. Low income, less than $2 per day, is like $60 a month, something like this, right? This is extreme poverty. If you look at the palm, you turn the hand around, it will look like this, right? You see a working life in the hands of these people. It's their main tool. This is visualizing extreme poverty, what it actually looks like. And we can go in and visit the homes, and suddenly the number starts to mean something. And that's when it's really interesting if you want to change people's worldview. First, you need to have them realize that they are actually wrong. That's the first problem. The biggest obstacle to learning is the illusion of knowledge. That's why we do the misconception study, to have people realize you're wrong. It's not only you, don't be ashamed. It's everyone else. 95% answer wrongly on that question, but you're actually wrong. Then you create a little space in the head of people where they want to fill with knowledge. Most people want to be correct. They don't like being wrong. Then you have an opportunity for what's called education. And that's why we do the misconception, to show people you and many others are wrong. This is what the world actually looks like. Then in classrooms across the world, thanks to Creative Commons license, it's being used millions of times. Students and teachers are using our tools, and we don't know exactly what their conclusions are, but it doesn't matter. We know that this is a more representative picture, not perfect, but more representative of what the world actually looks like. So if you go within a country, say the US, United States, these families have been so nice opening their homes for us. And you can see how we have a quite large distribution even within a country. So it's not only for looking at extreme poverty on a global level, but also within country differences. And we can go in and look, for example, let's look at the bedrooms of people on different income in US. And you can definitely see how, well, the beds are pretty nice. We should be looking at other stuff. We don't really have time for all of this, but we can look at their teeth, for example. Yeah, you get the point. We're using images, photos as data. That is Anna's innovation. It's really useful in classrooms. Here's one guy who really likes it. Thanks to Dollar Street, he can visit tons of homes without the news journalists coming there. It's Bill Gates brushing his teeth with a really cheap toothbrush. And it's fascinating. Of course, he's off the edge of Dollar Street. But we have a very huge difference between the richest and the poorest in the world. And we want to understand it, most of us, right? It's a fascinating. Here's a video, actually, showing toothbrushing on different income levels. So we're soon, I think within 6 months, launching thousands of videos on Dollar Street where you can actually do a home visit and see the reality behind the numbers. Then the statistics starts meaning something. And when you see people brushing their teeth all the way down there with plastic toothbrush, you realize that industrialization have reached almost all the way, except the 1 billion people roughly who are stuck in extreme poverty. And this is what it means. If more people, because of Corona lockdowns, are going to get even poorer, they're going to fall into the thing called extreme poverty, which looks like this. You don't have a toothbrush. This woman is using the wall to mud on the wall as her toothpaste. But we, the rich, remember I said we are the rich. We've never experienced extreme poverty. We think it's just a word, right? We think it's like relative poverty. It isn't. We need to visualize extreme poverty with a human face to tell people what it actually means. And this is the toothpaste that she is using. And you can find fascinating articles on Facebook and other places where we said the robots, the AI who try to identify things on images, they will have a very hard time seeing that this is toothpaste, right? Because they were trained in the rich environment, just like the academics who wrote the code for the AI. We are trained on a very skewed sample of data, right? My cursor is gone. Sorry. Oh, something went really wrong here. Yeah, there we go. I have to go back there. Sorry. Ooh. I have to jump in again. Sorry for that. I wanted to jump down to this place here. Okay, so this is the rich corner. The Howard family nicely opened their home for us. They live in this beautiful house, and they belong to the richest 20%. And inside US, we have a mom mom with a daughter on social welfare who also open their home and show their cutlery to us. And you can see the huge differences like this, right? So this is comparing. There is no number on this picture right now, right? So we're showing the world without statistic numbers, but based on data. This is roughly the variety inside US. We do the same thing in China. It starts to be interesting. Look, 3 different ways of living in China. There's not one single way, right? So show the differences within to be able to compare similarities between, right? And this is the richest China family, and in US a rich family. Look at their beds. They look almost identical. We're exaggerating culture in the pictures we have in our head. In reality, their lives look very, very similar. Their play structures look almost identical. Both are made in China, of course. But let's do Nigeria as well. We take a family in Nigeria, which looks nothing like this Chinese family. Of course, culturally, and this big black dad looks strong, and this small grandma in China is taking care of the granddaughter, the only child. Looks different. We had heard of all these cultural stereotypes, but look at the building. The way they build their roof is identical. Natural material and some plastic to not get wet when it rains. This is the sofa. There is the rice. Here is the fish. Here is how they boil their water, right? And this kind of comparisons is needed in schools across the world, because we're all watching the news, and the teacher feels so educated when they bring the news into the classroom. But they should be careful, because they are piling up a skewed picture in the heads of their students. And they should rather show representative picture and take the opportunity to teach the kids about a biased sample, a skewed sample, right? That's what it is. Look at Google. You Google for toilet. This is the toilets and the beds you find on Google, and the stoves, right? Nigeria home. This is what you find. Is this what homes look like in Nigeria? Yeah, according to Google. Are they trying to lie to us? Is this fake search results? No. There is always a filter when we're consuming information. We need to be aware of these filters and how they completely distort our worldview. So we have set up a system now where we're soon launching a ignorance reduction service. We call it right now. It's a temporary work name. But to get a chance to pass tests in the field where you want to be knowledgeable, there need to be a way to be aware of your ignorance, which is probably the same like everyone else. So we set up these test questions, and there are these innovation hubs in the world who started to use this and require it from the people they are hiring. And at your university, you probably don't want people who are more wrong than chimpanzees, right? So that's the gap minder. We're minding the gap between the reliable data and people's worldview. And we want to turn that into a service so that fewer people have to go to their workplace and be completely wrong about the world. Here are hundreds of lawyers in Stockholm at Mannheimer's Fackling who decided to actually test their whole staff. It's the first organization like that. Because today, when data exists, there is the first opportunity in human history to actually be correct about stuff, right? So we're innovating now as a spin-off of the first things my father did 25 years ago, when he figured that the teachers and the students at the top Swedish universities were just as wrong about the world as everyone else, or even worse. And he said, we need to fix this problem. So we're trying to innovate in that space, and we have been visualizing data a lot because there's no other way to have people see the world. Everybody cannot travel the world. And the things we see in statistics cannot be seen out of the window. Doesn't matter how big window you have, because you can only see a small part of it. So we need to be more literate in terms of data, and we need tools and quick services to stay up to date with what the world actually looks like. And we've tested the journalists in Stockholm, a few of them, and teachers like this. So I just want to finish with this little picture, and then I'm happy to answer questions. You recognize these two men, right? We need to test the teachers in Sweden, because most of them don't recognize these two men. Everybody who watched this video probably know them, right? Or maybe not. No, actually not. I'm pretty sure. I give their names so you're familiar, right? Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai. It's the CEOs of Microsoft and Google, right? When I test this in Sweden, almost nobody knows who these guys are. These guys were born in India. They were raised in India and educated in India, okay? not in the US. Then they moved to the US and made this career, and now they are heading the two global companies, which are wise, smart Western companies who decided, let's not put the flag into our logotype, because we had to have headquarters across the world. And in other parts of the world, European and American flags might not be that welcome, but that's where the brains are, right? I think these two companies are going to survive in the future workplace. Let me just jump to this final slide, because I just want you to be aware of what the world will look like. And the visualization research in your case will come from somewhere you're not expecting. This is what the world looks like simplified. If you take Dollar Street and the income mountains, we roughly have 1 billion without shoes in the world, and then 3 billions with bikes, dreaming of getting richer to get a motorcycle, right? This is a brutal simplification to replace the divided worldview, poor and rich. No, there are people having a motorbike or no shoes is like the most different lives you can imagine, right? And then we have 1 billion living like me. I have a car, and we overconsume, right? And what's going to happen next? To understand the future, we need to understand the present. And if I put out the Asian or the pink ones, you got Africa as blue, and these are the 4 billion or 5 billion Asians. Roughly, they are down on the bike level, some of them, but a few of them are super rich already. Satya and Sundara, the first two CEOs from India. But look what's going to happen next if GDP per capita continues as the trend was before Corona. Actually, these billions of people are going to start moving up Dollar Street. Everybody's struggling down there to get richer. Almost everyone, actually. Doesn't matter if you like it or not. Everybody want to get up to this fancy overconsumption life that we are living. And there will be so many Satya Sundars, and their companies are going to be run in India and China, and the Westerners better be prepared to stop misbehaving against other cultures, and we need to correct our worldview and realize we're not ahead of the gang any longer. We cannot set the rules, and we have to start behaving nicer. So that's why we need to visualize this. There's no way you can look out the window and see this. You can see it in the data, you can see in the economic forecasts, you can see it with the photos if you collect lots of them, but the world is completely changing out there. Our brains are stuck with a world that might be 50 years old. No women are heading governments, and the world is divided, and the people in low-income countries are just more and more, and nothing is getting better, and now we got Corona on top of it, and everything is bad, right? No. We're living in the first era with global collaboration. The WHO, this is the first time WHO already exists the moment a pandemic comes, right? This is a great practice for us of how the international community needs to work. Next time the pandemic hit us, imagine if it also kills children, right? Then WHO and the international community already had a chance to plan. This is the first time humans are collaborating on this planet. Of course, there are lots of problems. I'm not trying to deny this. But if we're not aware of the progress we're making and what works in terms of creating sustainable future, then we're stuck in the past, and we shouldn't be making the decisions for our children. I think I stop there, and I'll rather focus on the questions that I get from you. And I'm happy to share the results and all the questions which you afterwards online will put up some link somewhere. I hope that's fine, and probably Anders, you can jump in.
Sure. Thank you very much for an inspiring presentation, Ola. For many of us who have been following the development of Gapminder for many years, it's nice to hear a little bit about the background as well. Let me start by posing a few questions that are appearing both in the Discord here and also in the chat on YouTube. So we have one question here that is posed by Stefan Bruckner, and it says, to what degree do you think that the wrong answers in your questionnaire can be attributed to a kind of white guilt, people being aware that they live in privileged circumstances and therefore overcorrecting, maybe even consciously, when asked to assess the world in its entirety?
Very good question. Let me just emphasize that I dropped out of university. I have done no academic research on this. I've done only other research. every day of my life. So I have hypotheses and I test them and then I share the information. But there's tons of cognitive psychological research that is needed on top of the things that I just showed. I haven't done that. Though I've heard of the hypothesis of the emotional purpose of answering versus the correctness as a purpose, right? When someone asked me about I asked about girls in low-income countries, how many of them go to school, right? Primary school. And you were absolutely wrong, all of you, almost all of you, like everyone else. So we don't want to neglect the suffering. There are two victims in that question, right? Low income means poverty, and then there are girls, right? So when you put a victim into a question, yes, you get this exaggeration because we don't want to be the people who pretend that this problem doesn't exist, right? So yes, there is an systematic emotional anti-bias, whatever you call it, white guilt or whatever, where we're emotionally guided to portray ourselves in front of ourselves. No one else saw which checkbox I clicked, right? But in front of myself, I don't want to be the person who says, well, I think most girls in poor countries go to school. And that's an emotional, very nice human feeling that we want to see victims and we want to not neglect it or trivialize it, right? But when we do that all day in mass media, etc., and we exaggerate problems day out, day in, by the weekend, we're so tired and we say the world is just getting worse. So there is really a backflip to it. You're probably right about the results, but not all our questions have such aspect of a victimization or anything like that. So in some cases, you might have the correct answer there. Yes, that might be the reason why it's skewed. But also in conversations, in qualitative discussions with people, I hear the same conviction that, yeah, but there are so many poor refugees, right? And they don't have any schools. So people are truly convinced that that's what the world looks like. I don't have good instruments for explaining exactly what ingredient in the human mind is causing which wrong answer on which questions. So that's fascinating with the questions. Some of them are demographic questions. The climate change question, where we asked how much of the excess heat from global warming ends up in the oceans. Okay, I asked you that question. 10% of you were right. It's 90% of the heat ends up in the oceans. We're talking about the air being warmer here, the weather we're seeing here in Stockholm tonight and the clouds. Most of the heat is hitting in the ocean. Is there any victimization or anything going on there? No. It's just very difficult to keep track of proportions. And if you read the Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, there is what I see is what there is. If I have my brain full of discussions about the climate and the winds and the storms, I'm going to think that's where global warming is going on, right? And if I hear about refugee girls not going to school, I'm going to think that's the norm. It's very hard to keep track of proportions and statistics, especially if we never see them, right?
Right. You know, you're in front of an audience consisting of visualization experts and data analysis people, graphics researchers, and so of course one of the questions that appeared pretty early on during your presentation is the aggregation issue of data, that you are averaging to some extent over large populations, countries with huge diversity and inequalities inside of the countries, and you're representing them with an average number. And your reflection on the problematic aggregation algorithms that may be behind there, and how do you take care of those issues in your representations and your presentations?
It's a very good question. We have some visualizations we've done where we split bubbles to see the differences within. It might serve the opposite purpose. Sometimes if you do a disaggregation on the wrong stratification, for example, geography in China, you split it into its different districts, and the inland districts, yes, they are poorer. But the pockets of poverty in China, you don't find geographically. They are hidden. You need to split them by income, right? And then you have a few on a really low incomes. So sometimes when you show disaggregated data, you're going to be guided by the availability of numbers, right? And then you're showing a disaggregate, and people say, "Oh, the differences were not bigger than that." This is the difficulty. But the question is super relevant. In general, I wouldn't answer it like that. I would say we are comforted by measuring the size of the misconception. So our simplified picture, of course, it's a model is always a simplification, right? But it's better than the one we're replacing. If you can find an example where our simplification is less correct than the one we're replacing, please tell me. Of course, then, if you manage to get people's attention, often they ask this kind of question, then I'd love to have more data to disaggregate even further and show them that this was also a simplification, etc., etc. Few people have that attention to actually go into those details. And unfortunately, you will have to, like with the weather forecast, imagine you were a meteorologist. There's so much rich insight you wanted to tell the Swedish public every evening when you're going to show the weather map. But they just want to know if it's going to rain or not. Well, it's rain, and sometimes it rains a little bit. And you have this chance to have this cloud with a little bit of rain or a thunder. But as a meteorologist, there are all these variations of weather, right? But people don't have that attention span. You need to simplify it. And next day, if it rains, and they fail to understand your little legend there because you made it so advanced, and all the uncertainty was in there, they're going to blame you for lying to them, and they will never watch your channel again. So we need to simplify. When we talk about public communication, we should not be afraid of simplifying. I'm more afraid of not simplifying, because that's the main problem I see in many output from fancy visualization papers and researchers. I mean, I'm not doing the kind of anatomic or the astronomical visualizations you are dealing with, where you're representing the real 3D world as something I can see on a 2D surface or something like that. No, I'm purely working with statistic visualizations where the world I'm representing with colors on the screen is a world that cannot be seen anywhere else. It's not like another representation. Yeah, it is a very abstract phenomena, like rape statistics from Finland. Of course, you can see it, but you can never see the big picture anywhere else than in the statistics, if it's going up or down. So suicide rates are going down in Europe, for example, during the last 20 years. It's fantastic. Fewer people are committing suicide. So I tested the health ministers of WHO Europe last year, and they were so wrong about it. Almost all of them thought suicide in Europe is going up. And then when I told them, they corrected me with this aggregation problem that actually suicides among young people is not going down. Yeah, but I didn't say that. I talked about the average, and among adults, older people, psychiatry seems to work. There's something that works. I can't really say what, but it has been working. But they are correct. Among teenagers, actually, the rate is almost going up in some countries, right? So but when you have managed to explain that people were wrong about one misconception, you have opened up a play field where data is going to be used to understand it. That's when you have the chance to start disaggregating. You need to be ready for these things. Yes.
Well, I would love to continue this discussion, and as someone pointed out here, one of our information visualization researchers, and in fact, many of the researchers who are online here today are of the information visualization community, the visual analytics community, and they are highly interested in the work that you're doing and the kind of statistics and visualization work that you're doing. There's actually a session tomorrow, as was pointed out, on the effects of aggregation of data. One paper presented exactly on what we're talking about here, which I'll probably forward a PDF copy to you.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
As a final comment from you, I mean, you are extremely successful in terms of reaching out to extremely large, wide audiences with visualization work, and you had impact far beyond the academic community and reaching out there. What is, if you just summarize in a few sentences, what is the essence of the key to that success in your approach? Where's the secret?
In honor of my father, I want to quote him. How do you know? What you just said, you believe, right? But how do you know? You confused three phenomena. Success, you confused it with impact and fame. I think we succeeded with fame. My father used to say, I have the highest fame to impact ratio in the world. Because when I tested you, 90% of you were wrong about the things that my father tried to show 20 years ago. So be careful. Please do some research. Is this really having impact, or are we just getting fame? That's why we wrote the book Factfulness. We said we need to try something else. People sit at these TED conferences. Look at the TED conference I did with my father in Berlin, saying how not to be ignorant about the world. We test the TED audience who love my father at that point. They say he's so fantastic. We tested them. They are so wrong about the same things that we have been talking about before. To change people's understanding, it's not enough at lecturing, giving presentations. I think it's like almost the worst thing you can do. People sit there and enjoy. We create this consensus of we being the intellectual ones, and we don't learn shit. Unfortunately, I think examination, like when you got your driving license, how do you know that you know the rules of the Swedish traffic system? Because someone tested you, and you finally passed that test. That would be knowledge, that would be impact. That's why we're starting to create an examination tool, because I actually don't believe in live presentations as a method to change people's understanding. That would be my final remark. We truly need to change people's worldview. We better change the method, and that's why I'm not giving so many live presentations, even though I love to be on the stage and people clap their hands and say, you're fantastic. But when I test them afterwards, no, I didn't change their understanding. That's something else. This is a social way of having fun together. And in academia, of course, it gets so boring to read all these papers. So sometimes we have to meet in so-called conferences. That's not really where we learn stuff. We network and so.
Ola, by looking at the number of beautiful comments that you're getting on your YouTube stream, I certainly believe that you had at least some impact. Whether it changes the knowledge base of the community remains to be seen. But certainly your presentation has had impact on this community here, and we're very, very grateful that you took your time.
Let me invite people to contact us. Email to info@gapminder.org. We got tons of data and problems which you could do a lot of research on. And we're sharing everything for free under Creative Commons. And if you find something interesting, we're also going to publish it and help you get attention for it. So please contact us, and we need help with visualizing data or analyzing the impact of the visualizations, etc. I'm not going to do the research, but we have tons of hypotheses. Please contact us. Thank you very much.
I think you can expect a stream of emails coming in tomorrow, Ola. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.